Imagine this. In 1942, as a pilot exhausted by war, you are flying through the darkening skies of the Pacific. Below, the familiar silhouette of an aircraft carrier appears, its deck lit for landing. Thinking you're returning home, you begin your descent. But as you glide toward the deck, you notice the faces watching you are unfamiliar. Subscribe for more untold World War II stories. This isn't a Hollywood thriller. It's exactly what happened on the evening of May 7, 1942, during the Battle of the Coral Sea. In one of the most surreal moments in naval history, disoriented Japanese pilots attempted to land on the USS Yorktown, perfectly encapsulating the deep complexity of early aircraft carrier warfare. To understand how such an incredible mix-up could occur, one must understand the context of May 1942. The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first time in history that aircraft carriers would fight each other, with neither the Americans nor the Japanese fully comprehending the rules of this new form of combat. Japan, at the peak of its Pacific expansion, aimed to seize Port Moresby in New Guinea to threaten Australia. Standing in their way was a U.S. fleet centered on two precious assets, the carriers USS Lexington and USS Yorktown. Opposing them were the veteran Japanese carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku, crewed by some of the most experienced naval aviators in the world. The battle was fought blindly, across hundreds of miles of ocean, with both fleets groping for each other with primitive radar and scout planes. It was a contest where a single bomb in the wrong place could turn a floating airfield into a raging inferno. The events leading to the incident began on May 7th. After a day of trading blows with the U.S., sinking the light carrier Shoho, and the Japanese sinking a U.S. destroyer and oiler, the Japanese commander Admiral Takeo Takagi grew desperate. Furious that the main American carriers had eluded him, and with darkness approaching, he made a fateful decision. He launched a twilight strike. 27 Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes roared off the decks of Shokaku and Zuikaku into the dusk. These were elite pilots, but the ensuing air battle with American F-4F Wildcat fighters scattered their formation across the ocean. Many were shot down, while others, disoriented and low on fuel, desperately began searching for a place to land as night fell. As the scattered Japanese pilots searched for their fleet, they spotted the landing lights of carriers in the distance. Exhausted, their nerves frayed from combat, and equipped with primitive navigation tools, they made a critical assumption. Those ships must be theirs. On the deck of the USS Yorktown, the crew was preparing to recover their own fighters. Suddenly, the landing signal officer noticed an aircraft with unfamiliar fixed landing gear entering the pattern. It was a Japanese Aichi Val dive bomber. Instinctively following his training, the American LSO waved the plane off. The Japanese pilot, equally well trained, automatically obeyed the signal and aborted his landing. For a few surreal seconds, military procedure overrode the reality of war. Then, as the plane circled, realization struck. The Yorktown's captain, Elliot Buckmaster, gave the historic naval command, "Stand by to repel boarders!" Not for an infantry assault, but for an enemy aircraft attempting to land voluntarily. Every gun on the Yorktown that could bear opened fire. The Japanese pilots, finding themselves in the middle of a 4th of July fireworks display of tracer rounds, instantly grasped their catastrophic error. The lead pilot jammed his throttle forward, pulling away just in time as his wingmen scattered into the night. This bizarre incident highlights the profound chaos of combat. The Japanese pilots were not incompetent. They were elite aviators undone by human exhaustion and the technological limitations of their era. Identification failure. In the poor light, the silhouettes of US and Japanese carriers were difficult to distinguish. Furthermore, landing procedures and light signals were remarkably similar, as the Japanese had studied and adopted American techniques. Technological gaps. Without modern identification friend or foe systems, radar could not distinguish between friendly and enemy aircraft. Visual identification, the primary method, proved woefully inadequate in the twilight. The paradox of training. The very discipline that made these pilots effective warriors instinctively following an LSO's signal almost made them inadvertent prisoners of war. The psychological impact was enormous. For the American sailors, it was a moment of absurdity. For the Japanese pilots, the horror of their mistake would have been compounded by the deep cultural shame associated with capture. Of the 27 Japanese aircraft launched that evening, only 18 made it back to their carriers. The rest were lost. The Battle of the Coral Sea would end as a tactical victory for Japan, but a strategic victory for the US, as the invasion of Port Moresby was halted. However, the most enduring lesson was a human one. In the heat of battle, when technology and training reach their limits, soldiers on both sides share the same fundamental desire: to find their way home. This surreal incident remains a stark reminder that in the fog of war, the line between friend and foe can disappear entirely in the darkness.